Hey everybody, this is Kohdok here, and today we are going to be taking a brief look at the Huntik trading card game. We're mostly going to be taking a look at this one because, as I showed in a previous video, Huntik starter decks are going to be a rather significant component in the upcoming Kohdok box of junk. I have almost 40 of the two-player starter sets to include across about 100 boxes, and I actually have a bunch of, just the evil half deck, like 43 copies of that, which I don't know what I'm going to do with. I might partition some to include in boxes, etc., etc. But anyway, I figured I would talk a little bit about the game, maybe play it a little bit. Yes, there actually is a way for me to play this game solo. So, the Huntik card game is based on the series of the same name, developed by Eugenio Straffi. You might know Eugenio Straffi as the creator of the Winx Club series, but in this case it is a series about some people who race around the world to find the energy of the universe. No, not that show. Although it does come from the same time period. It is a show from that same era when Bakugan got popular, and there was all these shows that were one little nonsense word, and it was about monsters and stuff. So you had, like, this, and Redakai, and Monsuno, and Gormiti, and all of those. Gormiti and Huntik both come out of Italy. Like I said, Eugenio Straffi, Winx Club is also out of Italy. I think this was actually made partly to try to compete with Gormiti. I think Gormiti was Mondo, and Huntik was Rainbow. So I think these were actually meant to be direct competitors, but it's a series where you have these characters who go around the world to recover amulets that contain titans. Now, these titans are basically, heroes and gods and monsters of legend. So you'd think it would be a series that makes great use of, like, the lore associated with those characters, and I'm sorry to say, it really doesn't. How much of Huntik I have watched came across to me as really mild on the lore level. Like, they'll have the things, like, they'll feature the events and the things from history, but they won't really, like, elaborate on it. They won't have, like, a character, like, give a brief talk about, like, the mythological origins of these things that gives the other characters some kind of advantage to realize how they're supposed to, like, solve the puzzle and do the thing. Like I said, I found it really mild. It only lasted 3 seasons, mainly because it hit an end game that it really couldn't turn around from. Apparently it was struggling in the animation department up until then. It's pretty mild. The starter set actually came with, like, a DVD that had an episode on it. What I was hoping it would include on there is the Huntik trading card game has simultaneously one of the most ambitious and bizarre pieces of trading card game media I have ever seen, and that is they have a fully animated tutorial video about how to play this trading card game. And I don't mean like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon or one of those where they, like, cut to a scene from the show to have the character, like, do a mock one-off, but I mean they, like, legit animated it. Like, you have the characters, like, shuffling decks and setting up playmats and stuff, and it would be interesting if it wasn't for the fact that its presentation is ridiculously awkward.
Ready to learn about one of the most important tools available to the Foundation? The Huntik trading card game.
Yes, one of our greatest tools for fighting evil, children's trading cards. Oh man, little Kariba would be proud. Anyway, the Huntik card game, it came out in 2009. It also ended in 2009 after just 3 sets. Although, like I was saying, they committed the sin of basing their game on something that ended. I don't know if they expected Huntik to be able to last longer than it did. It lasted barely 3 seasons, and the card game itself got barely 3 sets before being canceled. It also requires a mat, like this playmat here. It actually requires a huge playmat, and it requires, you to know where on that mat you are. It's a bit different. Rather than having like a chessboard grid, it instead has, like, ranks. You can do 1 of 5 rows, essentially. Doing these sorts of rows isn't that unusual. Like, I know, like, the Vampire Rivals, I don't know if the original Eternal Struggle did that too, but they have, like, cards that are next to, like, your deck and stuff are at your home base, and then cards that are, like, a step forward or, like, out in the field or on the streets, as they call it. So Relative placement can still be done with trading card games. Like Yu-Gi-Oh uses relevant placement with like the field center card, which can be done pretty easily. It's a lot simpler than a lot of them are. But the big one though is the mission cards. You notice how these cards have two different colored backs. You have the orange cards, which represent the cards that go into your deck. They represent the heroes, the titans, the actions and spells and whatnot, and the green back cards, which represent the mission cards. Now this is what really sets Huntik apart, is these mission cards. Now what happens is it's not just a straight up slobber knocker fight. The win condition is determined by whatever mission card is put on the top, whatever mission card is put into play. You have the mission card and then you have the features of that mission. So to recover the Hammer Mjolnir, you get Fenris and Gleipnir and the Mjolnir Hammer in order to, so these guys get set out on the field, and there are rules attached to them where characters, you know, they spend actions like pick up the rope and then they have to go up to Fenris and tie him up in order to finally get to Hammer Mjolnir and, you know, win the tournament. This is an example of a solo mission. There are also competitive missions, where what happens is one player is the attacker and is trying to complete the mission, and the other character is the defender and is trying to prevent them from completing that mission, which is done over the course of 7 mutual turns. Essentially, there are 7 rounds where players take turns going back and forth until they run out of the ability to do things, then they move on to the next turn. So, turn limits is really something I haven't really talked about. There are some games that use turn limits, and the way to use a turn limit, like I said, is to either involve a game that has like a victory point system. Like there are also in Huntik, believe it or not, there are mutual missions where both players are competing to accomplish the same task, and they try to either gain control of an object or rack up rewards or something like that. Or in this case, we have an attacker-defender scenario where the defender just has to hold on for a number of turns in order to win. And this is a game from 2009. It predates a lot of games like Arkham Horror and all of that in having the mission-style gameplay, including missions you can play by yourself. This is Hammer Mjolnir. I'm gonna play this mission to finish out the episode. But I think one of the big problems with these missions was they were put into, I mean, you got a bunch with the starter deck, like this one comes from the starter deck, but a bunch of them were included in booster packs, and by the time they got into booster packs, this is from the final set, they were double-sided, so one side was the mission itself, and another one was one of those missions components, so you had to get all of the missions components, and they weren't like you'd expect, with like energy cards or land cards, where you get one of these mission cards per pack. No, they were randomly inserted, in place of other cards. So it was actually really difficult to get all of these mission pieces together, and that's kind of a problem when they are the medium through which you play your game. Like I was talking about before, a game like this that uses missions does better when there's a way to acquire the missions in bulk. They could have, later down the line, if the game had lasted longer, done more starter decks that contained more missions, done like mission expansions, or, like I said, make the mission components a once-per-pack thing that people can then freely exchange to get all the parts of, rather than making them rare. I think these were like 1 in 3 packs, which was weird. So, anyway, back to the main cards. What you do is you have essentially 3 types of cards in the game. You have the heroes, which come in... you have the major heroes, which are like the big, strong characters. You can only put one of these characters in play per turn. You have the minor heroes, which usually have lower combat stats and weaker abilities. You can put as many of these as you have in your hand per turn. And the actions. These are actions and spells. The thing is, it's a little bit like Vampire: The Eternal Struggle, Vampire Rivals, in that you have to have a hero in play who then performs that action. So for example, I could get LeBlanche to perform recovery, but I cannot play recovery if my field is empty and I have no ready heroes who can perform that ability. Now, there's 5 zones that heroes can move through. Heroes can spend their action to move up to 2. They can spend their action to attack. They can spend their action to use an action. Sometimes the characters themselves have built-in actions that they can spend themselves in order to use. But there's a lot of a lot of that kind of craziness, a lot of that kind of fun stuff. Basically, players take turns either playing a card or using an action until both players pass, in which case it moves on to the next round. The artwork on this card is the artwork here. It's kind of interesting. It's very consistent, very on model with the things you see from the show, and it was apparently done by a group called Cold Fusion Studios, and that's Fusion with a Z. I looked them up. I couldn't find much information about them aside from their work on this game. Apparently, they did some work on some comic books. They also did some artwork for Red Dragon Inn, but aside from that, I can't really find much information on them at all. Apparently they tried to trademark themselves, but that lapsed like almost immediately, so I wish I had more information to give you on Cold Fusion Studios, but all my research turned up was that they were basically an art asset company that helps on this kind of thing, and I think they did a great job here. This looks like it could have been done by the show's animators. It uses the same ethos as like the Dragon Ball card game, where the goal is to make it look like a screenshot out of the show. And like I said, I think this all looks really nice. I have to give kudos to the folks who worked on these illustrations. Although another thing here is they break another sin of unmixable attributes. You have to either build a good deck or an evil deck. There is no crossing between them. The good cards are blue, the evil cards are red. I might have, aside from having the label of evil here, I might have gone with another way to distinguish these characters. Color blindness is a thing. There are folks who confuse red and green. There are folks who cannot tell blue and orange apart. If you wonder why, even though red and green are labeled as complementary colors, which are opposites, why they so frequently use red and blue instead, that is probably a reason, because most forms of color blindness can distinguish those colors. Anyway, moving on. A thing is, to my understanding, I've been looking briefly through the rules. Even though you have to build either a 100% good or a 100% evil deck, you do not have to play good versus evil, at least from what I have found. You could play a good deck versus a good deck, or an evil deck versus an evil deck, and I like that because it's like Star Wars Destiny, and I like that because it means you only have to bring one deck to a tournament, and you could easily explain it away as some kind of special training mission or infighting that these groups are having. So that's the thing that tends to happen so much with games that use good versus evil, is you have to play a good deck versus an evil deck, which means either you're going to have a huge mess of people where it's lopsided one way depending on the tiers, like if there's a really good evil deck that comes out, nobody's going to be playing good, or people have to bring two decks to tournaments and they have to flip between good or evil, which that seems like asking people to bring a lot. Being able to have the good versus good and evil versus evil, I think, is by far the better option. I mean, you could say that it's Marvel Civil War, where all of the good guys are fighting each other. But yeah, that's it's an oddball. Like I said, it's definitely an oddball game. It does a lot of, it certainly has a lot of sins. I never really knew it to catch on somewhere. I was able to get the cards from the final set. I was able to get those cards ludicrously cheap. I got like booster boxes for like $8. It was plus shipping, but if you order multiple boxes at once, they cut down on the shipping, so in the end, each one cost me maybe $11-12, which for 24 packs is really good. That's 50 cents a pack. That's about what I'm shooting for the box of awesome, although I opened a bunch of the packs to partition them and play with them. But yeah, I am going to be making a large document, maybe a mega, maybe a zip of some kind, that is going to have the mission cards, it's going to have the rule book, it's going to have a special token sheet I have made that allows you to sort of replicate the board. So the people who get the Huntik decks are going to be able to play the game. It took a little bit to find all of this information, but it'll be fun. I'm going to put it all into one place, and I hope you guys enjoy. Now we are going to play a round, and I figure we should go with the starter deck mission, Get the Hammer Mjolnir. Okay, so here is our mission map. This is what I was describing before. This is a required element to have in play in order to play the game. Now, normally you have the zones here that count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For my opponent, it's the opposite: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And normally players are playing their heroes and they're moving them forward, and confrontations in this case are forced because if I were to put a hero into play and I got it out to here, my opponent cannot go past this hero to complete their missions or their tasks until they deal with this hero. So that's how combat gets forced. In this case, we are playing a solo game, and yes, I do have an extra deck. The extra deck was introduced in the final set. These are the Legendary Titans. But first we need to go by the mission card setup, which in this case is get the Hammer Mjolnir, and according to the instructions, put Fenris into Zone 3, and the Gleipnir Rope into Zone 5. The Hammer Mjolnir is currently held to the side. Now, my goal in this mission is to get a hero past Fenris, who will then grab the Gleipnir Rope and use it to tie up Fenris, which then causes the Hammer Mjolnir to spawn. Then I just have to grab the hammer and I win. The thing that makes that difficult is that Fenris is a 6/5. Those are absolutely monstrous stats. There is nothing that is going to survive the damage that comes from that, and even if they have an equivalent exchange, if I have something that deals enough damage to knock him down, all it does is it stuns him. So basically he is unable to move for a turn, and then he'll come back to life and wreck my life again. His movement is determined by a roll of a 6-sided dice, which I don't think was included in the starter set. It's been a while. This is a game from 2009 after all. So what happens is this is actually a different setup from the actual main game. The main game has a time limit. The solo mode has a resource limit. So I only draw a certain number of cards from my deck, and I have to use those cards or I lose. If I run out of options, then that's how I lose. So very different kind of thing. It means you have to build a pretty specific kind of deck. So this deck has a lot of draw power. Fenris may play like a hero, but he's not counted as a hero. He is counted as an obstacle. So I cannot use effects that target heroes. So I do have an extra deck. So I'll just go ahead with it. The highest difficulty, if I wanted to really give myself a challenge, that's I only get 6 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And let's see. I could probably win with this hand here. I am unfortunately missing one of the main cards that I need in order to succeed, but I got a card that can handle Fenris's assault. So we are going to we're going to go with this. We're going to see how well I can do. So instead of rounds, it's alternated by turns. Basically, each of us, I and the automated obstacles, take 3 actions before we go back to the start. So the first action is actually this obstacle. We roll a die to see what he does. So he got a 6. So Fenris moves back until he enters a zone with a hero. So that's the thing about Fenris, is he can just jump all around the board. This mission, according to the rules, has no blocking. So he can leap past my guys, leap forward onto... he can leap forward, leap back, he can do all sorts of crazy stuff. He is a real pain to deal with, and right now, he is exactly where I do not want him. So for my first action, I'm going to play Dark Pharaoh Sandsnake. He's a minor hero, but he has a power of 5, which means if Fenris bumps into him, Fenris will get stunned. So, Fenris goes, he rolled a 1, that is move forward 1. So he will either move forward 1, move back 1, or charge until he hits somebody. So with Dark Pharaoh Sandsnake in play, that means I can now, let's see, all I really have here is the ability to play a major hero, so I'm going to play the Professor, because he can survive if Fenris attacks him. What happens is, when a creature attacks, when an obstacle attacks, they automatically target the character with the highest defense first, and the Professor has a defense of 5, which is the highest defense I have in this entire deck. I don't know if there are any cards that go higher than 5, except for Overlos, but he is basically this game's Exodia. He's really hard to get out into play, so that's a pain. So let's see what Fenris does now. This is his final action for the round. He is going to roll a 4, which means he moves 1 zone back. So that means so I have 1 more action before the round starts over. I unfortunately do not really have anything I can play. I have a major hero, something that lets me get a major hero, and I think I'm going to use the Dark Pharaoh Sandsnake to play Trailblazer. It doesn't do anything for me right now, but it does let me draw a card, and I didn't get what I want, but this guy could be helpful. So everybody refreshes at the start of the round, and do not roll a 5, please. A 2, so he moves 1 zone forward. Okay, so I'm going to start by moving Sand Pharaoh up 2. It exhausts him there, but if Fenris charges forward, that means Fenris will be stunned for the round, and I can safely move the Professor. We are going to roll for Fenris. He got a 1, so he moves 1 step forward and initiates a combat. He does not exhaust, but Dark Pharaoh Sand Snake is killed, but Fenris gets stunned, so he cannot act for the round. Now, normally when you stun, you turn him upside down, but because he doesn't exhaust, I'm just going to do that. So he does not get a third action. So I am going to move the Professor into Fenris' zone because that is safe. Fenris can only initiate a combat if he moves. So I can put the Professor there to keep him safe. Fenris is stunned, so he takes no action. And then for my final action, I am going to... I'm going to play Gargoyle as my major hero for the round. So that is the start. Fenris and the Professor wake up. Not a 5, please. A 3. So he is going to move back 1. Thankfully, I can freely move through a zone. So I am going to... Actually, I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to advance Gargoyle into the Professor's room here. So it is Fenris's turn. 1, he's going to advance forward, so we're going to initiate a combat. Now, the Professor has a useful ability where combat action, once per combat, I can discard a card to remove 2 attacks from my combat. And what that means is I basically reduce Fenris's power by 2. So I'm going to discard Finders Keepers because it does me no good, because I technically have the Amulet of Arachnos right here. To reduce the amount of damage Fenris does by 2, he now does 4, which does not overcome the Professor. When a combat happens, all monsters in the area jump in, whether they're exhausted or not. So I'm going to deal 8 to Fenris, which stuns him for the turn. So that means I get a free round to move the Professor into position. If I can get the Professor to last 1 more turn, I can have him grab the rope and tie up Fenris to try to get this mission done and over with. Fenris is stunned. It is my turn. Yeah, I'm going to play it. I'm going to play Amulet of Arachnos to bring the legendary hero Arachnos into play. I have the Professor in play, so my opponent does not get to draw a card. However, my opponent is a robot who does not have a deck, so it does not matter either way. Even though Arachnos is the strongest of the legendary titans not named Overlos, he still only has a defense of 5. But still, if Fenris decides to ram his face into Arachnos, then he'll be out for the turn, and I'll be in pretty good shape. So, start of the round. Characters ready. Alright, this is the big one. As long as it's not a 6. Well, crumbs! So Fenris is going to charge forward, and he's going to attack the Professor. The Professor, I'm going to discard my final card to reduce the damage. Unfortunately, the Professor does not have enough damage to overcome Fenris. However, Professor is going to, as for my first action, Professor is going to exhaust, and he is going to pick up Gleipnir's Rope. A hero with Gleipnir's Rope in Fenris' zone may remove the Gleipnir's Rope from the map to tie up and stun Fenris. So, boom, goodbye. So you are stunned, Fenris, for the round, although that only works for the round. So, and now, if Fenris is tied up, I get to put Hammer Mjolnir into Zone 5. So, Fenris' action, he's tied up. My action, Gargoyle, is going to run in and grab Hammer Mjolnir. Victory! Woo! Okay, that got a little tense there. If it wasn't for the fact that I had the Professor's ability to force the damage down, I would have been wiped. My deck actually has a more reliable strategy. I did not draw the card to do that. There's a card called Absorb Strength, which allows me to discard a character from play to give another character +3/+3, basically permanently. So I could have, sacrificed Gargoyle or the Professor or something to give like the Professor or Arachnos +3/+3 to basically make it so that Fenris cannot defeat them at all, and then I could just waltz up to my goal. But I was able to do it. I squeezed it through. And like I said, that was hard mode. So I had the 1/2. I didn't have this card in play, so the 1/2 3, 4, 5, 6, and I drew a card with Trailblazer for 7. So that was hard mode. So, well, that was actually evil difficulty, I'd say. There are difficulties from 1 to 5. On the easiest difficulty, your starting hand is actually 10 cards instead of 6. So I played this on the hardest difficulty by having just 6, and I barely squeaked it out. So, yay, that was fun. Although, if I want to have some real fun, if people like this video, maybe I will do another video where I try to defend the Amulet of Will. It is the only other solo mission. They did not actually come out with too many missions for this game. They only had 2 solo missions. They only had a couple of mutual missions. But it is a fight against the AI entity, and guard the Amulet of Will is Scheming Professor. So it's going to be a Professor Mirror match. Ooh, look forward to that. So yeah, that was a quick dive into the Huntik trading card game. Like I said, it's an odd duck. It would definitely work a lot better as a game that sold itself maybe not as a trading card game, or with a bit of restructuring as a trading card game. Mission style gameplay has gotten a lot more popular with the rise of like Marvel Champions, Arkham Horror, so games like this might be able to work. I don't know if a Huntik co-op game would be doable, or something that uses the formula. You know, I actually wonder what's happened to the Huntik IP, if somebody like actually went ahead and made this game. I don't think this game got an abandonware treatment the same way games like Vampire the Eternal Struggle or the Star Wars CCG did, but yeah, there we go. So this is the Huntik trading card game, and until next time, this is Kohdok signing off.